The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the Lone Star Charity Rodeo grounds in Amarillo, turning the packed dirt arena into a shimmering heat trap. The smell of funnel cakes, livestock, and sweat hung thick in the August air as over 3,000 spectators crammed into the weathered wooden bleachers. Children waved miniature Texas flags while vendors hawked ice-cold lemonades, their voices competing with the twang of country music blasting from crackling speakers. Wyatt Brennan adjusted his black Stetson and flashed his trademark grin at the crowd from atop the announcer's platform. At 32, he was rodeo royalty, 6-time national bull riding champion, heir to the Brennan oil fortune, and the kind of man whose square jaw and piercing blue eyes graced billboards across 3 states. His custom-embroidered shirt bore his initials in gold thread, and his belt buckle, worth more than most people's cars, caught the sunlight like a small sun. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for your champion." The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, and the crowd erupted in applause that felt more obligatory than enthusiastic. Wyatt descended the platform steps with practiced swagger, his expensive python skin boots clicking against the metal. He'd done this routine 100 times: sign autographs, kiss a few babies, remind everyone why he was the best. The charity angle was just good PR, something his publicist insisted would soften his image after that incident in Houston, where he'd called a competitor's 8-second ride embarrassing. Near the livestock pens, Grace Holloway knelt beside a quarter horse, her hands moving with gentle precision as she examined the animal's injured foreleg. At 38, Grace had the kind of weathered beauty that came from years working under the Texas sun, laugh lines around her green eyes, calloused hands that could calm a spooked stallion, and auburn hair pulled back in a perpetual ponytail. Her veterinary kit lay open beside her, organized with the meticulous care of someone who couldn't afford mistakes. "Easy, girl," Grace murmured, her voice low and soothing. The mare's muscles relaxed under her touch. 15 feet away, her son Levi sat on an overturned feed bucket, his crutch propped against his right side. At 16, Levi was all sharp angles and cautious movements, his sandy brown hair falling across his forehead as he stared intently at his smartphone. He was mapping the rodeo grounds using a GPS app, documenting every entrance, exit, and vendor location with the methodical precision that defined his world. Numbers and patterns made sense. People didn't. "Mom, did you know there are exactly 47 vendor booths, and the south exit is 127 feet from the medical tent?" Levi said without looking up, his voice flat but earnest. Grace smiled, her heart swelling with the familiar mixture of pride and protectiveness. "That's fascinating, honey. You keeping yourself entertained?" "Data is always entertaining," Levi replied, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose with one finger. The crowd's roar suddenly intensified, pulling Grace's attention back to the arena. Wyatt Brennan was making his way through the throng, shaking hands and accepting praise with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. Grace had seen him around the circuit for years, always surrounded by admirers, always performing. She'd treated his horses twice and found him polite enough in those brief interactions, but there was something performative about him that set her teeth on edge. "Watch where you're going, kid," a gruff voice snapped nearby. Grace's head whipped around just in time to see a heavy-set man in a stained tank top shouldering past Levi, nearly knocking him off his bucket. Levi's hands tightened around his phone, his jaw clenching in that way Grace recognized as sensory overload beginning. "Hey," Grace called out, her voice sharp. "Be careful." The man muttered something unintelligible and disappeared into the crowd. Grace abandoned the horse and hurried to Levi's side, her hand briefly touching his shoulder, firm pressure, the way he liked it, not the light touches that made his skin crawl. "You okay, sweetheart?" "Too many people," Levi said, his eyes still fixed on his screen. "Decibel level is approximately 95. Optimal comfort is 70. "I know. We'll head out soon, I promise. Just need to finish with Luna here." Across the grounds, Wyatt was holding court near the VIP section, regaling a group of sponsors with some embellished story about his last competition in Fort Worth. A young woman thrust a program toward him for an autograph, and he obliged with a flourish, adding his signature star emblem. Mr. Brennan, my daughter's such a fan, an older woman gushed, pushing a girl of about 10 forward. Wyatt dropped to one knee with practiced charm. Well, any daughter of yours must be pretty special. What's your name, darling? As the girl stammered out her name, Wyatt's attention was already drifting. He'd spotted someone in his peripheral vision, Grace Holloway, kneeling by that horse again. Something about her always caught his eye. Maybe it was the way she moved with quiet confidence or how she never seemed impressed by his reputation. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, Grace barely seemed to notice he existed. He'd never told anyone, but 3 years ago at a rodeo in San Antonio, he'd watched her save a bull rider's horse from colic in the middle of the night. While everyone else had been partying in the VIP tent, Grace had been in that barn for 6 hours straight, refusing to leave until the animal was stable. Wyatt had stood in the shadows, unnoticed, watching her work with a dedication he'd never applied to anything in his life. Mr. Brennan. The little girl was still staring at him expectantly. Right, sorry, sweetheart. He scribbled his autograph and straightened up, his knees protesting slightly. He wasn't getting any younger, though he'd never admit it. The announcement crackled overhead. Barrel racing competition begins in 5 minutes. All competitors to the staging area. The crowd began shifting, creating a human tide toward the arena entrance. Wyatt moved with them, accepting backslaps and praise, his mind partially elsewhere. He should go talk to Grace, maybe offer to buy her a coffee after the event. Casual, friendly, no big deal. He was so lost in thought that he didn't see Levi stand up from his bucket, didn't register the teenager carefully positioning his crutch to navigate through the growing crowd. Wyatt turned sharply to avoid a running child, and his boot connected solidly with Levi's crutch. The aluminum crutch flew sideways with a metallic clatter, and Levi stumbled, his face going pale as he fought to keep his balance. His phone slipped from his grasp, hitting the dirt with a sickening crack. Time seemed to slow. The noise around them dimmed. Wyatt looked down at the fallen crutch, then up at the kid struggling to stay upright, and something cold settled in his stomach. "Watch it!" someone yelled from the crowd. But Wyatt's pride kicked in before his conscience could. He was Wyatt Brennan. He didn't make mistakes. This kid should have been paying attention, shouldn't have been in the way. "Maybe keep your equipment under control, son," Wyatt heard himself say, his voice carrying that dismissive edge he used with incompetent competitors. The words hung in the air like smoke. Levi's face flushed red, his hands trembling as he bent awkwardly to retrieve his crutch. Grace appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her expression transforming from concern to cold fury in seconds. "What did you just say?" Her voice was quiet, dangerous. Wyatt's brain finally caught up with his mouth. The crowd around them had gone silent, all eyes turning toward the confrontation. He saw the crutch, saw the kid's unsteady gait, saw Grace's protective stance, and reality crashed over him like a bucket of ice water. A low murmur rippled through the spectators. Someone booed, then another. Within seconds, the sound swelled into a wave of disapproval that made Wyatt's ears burn. "That's Grace's boy," someone muttered nearby. "He's special needs. Brennan just kicked that kid's crutch. Did you see that? What an asshole." The boos grew louder, more insistent. Wyatt stood frozen, watching Grace help Levi steady himself, her movements gentle but her eyes blazing when they met his. In that moment, he saw himself through her gaze. Not as a champion, not as a millionaire, but as exactly what he was. A man whose ego had just hurt a kid who didn't deserve it. Wyatt started, but Grace cut him off. "Stay away from us." She retrieved Levi's cracked phone from the dirt, her jaw tight. "Come on, Levi, let's get out of here." As mother and son moved away, the crowd parted for them like a sea, and the boos followed Wyatt like a shadow he couldn't shake. The evening air had cooled by barely 5 degrees when Wyatt found himself alone in the VIP tent, nursing a whiskey he didn't want and replaying the afternoon's disaster in his head. The charity rodeo had continued without him. He'd withdrawn from the bull riding competition, claiming a pulled muscle. Though everyone knew the real reason, the boo still echoed in his ears, a sound he'd never heard directed at him in 15 years of competition. Through the tent's open flap, he could see families streaming toward the parking lot, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the silence surrounding him. His phone had buzzed incessantly for the past 3 hours. His publicist, his manager, his father. He'd ignored them all. "You look like a man who just discovered consequences exist," a gravelly voice said. Wyatt looked up to find Buck Morrison standing in the tent entrance, his weathered face creased with something between disappointment and amusement. At 67, Buck was a rodeo legend, a former bull rider who'd transitioned into stock contracting and judging. More importantly, he was the closest thing Wyatt had to a moral compass, though Wyatt rarely consulted it. "Not in the mood, Buck." "Good. Makes what I'm about to say easier." Buck pulled up a folding chair and sat down heavily, his arthritic knees popping. "That was about the stupidest thing I've seen you do, and I once watched you try to ride a bull after 6 beers in Tulsa." Wyatt drained his whiskey. "I know." "Do you?" Buck leaned forward, his faded blue eyes sharp. "Because from where I'm sitting, you know you screwed up, but you don't know why it matters. That kid, Levi Holloway, he's been coming to these rodeos since he was 8 years old. Never caused a problem, never asked for special treatment. His mama brings him because he loves the patterns, the schedules, the way everything happens in sequence. You know what you did? You kicked the one thing that keeps him stable in a world that's already too loud and too unpredictable." The words landed like physical blows. Wyatt set his glass down carefully. "I didn't mean—" "Nobody ever means it, Wyatt. That's the problem." Buck pulled out his phone and showed him the screen. "This has been shared 4,000 times in the last 2 hours. Millionaire Cowboy attacks disabled teen. That's your legacy now, unless you do something real to change it." The video was crystal clear, shot from someone's phone in the crowd. Wyatt watched himself kick the crutch, saw the dismissive way he'd spoken, saw Grace's face as she'd told him to stay away. His stomach turned. "What do I do?" "For starters, you apologize. A real one, not some PR statement your people draft. Then you listen when they tell you what they need." Buck stood up with a grunt. "Grace is still here, by the way. Her truck won't start. She's over by the livestock pens waiting for a tow." Wyatt was on his feet before he could think better of it. "Thanks, Buck. Don't thank me yet. Grace Holloway doesn't suffer fools, and right now you're the biggest fool in Texas." Grace had her head buried under the hood of her ancient Ford F-250, a flashlight clenched between her teeth as she examined the engine. The truck had 287 miles on it, and the temperament of a stubborn mule, but it was paid off and usually reliable, usually being the operative word. "Alternator," she muttered around the flashlight, wiping grease on her already stained jeans. "Of course it's the alternator." Levi sat in the truck's cab with the door open, his backup phone, an older model Grace kept charged for emergencies, displaying a weather app. "Probability of rain tonight is 73%. Temperature will drop to 68 degrees by midnight. We should seek shelter." "Working on it, honey." Grace pulled her head out from under the hood and checked her own phone. The tow truck was still 40 minutes out, and the rodeo grounds were emptying fast. The main lights had already been switched off, leaving only the security floods that cast long, dramatic shadows across the dirt lot. She heard footsteps approaching and tensed, her hand instinctively moving to the tire iron she kept in her toolbox. But the figure that emerged from the shadows was unmistakable. Black Stetson, expensive boots, and an expression that looked almost human. "Ms. Holloway, Wyatt began. "No." Grace's voice was flat, final. She turned back to her engine. "Whatever you're about to say, I don't want to hear it. I know. You have every right to tell me to go to hell." Wyatt stopped a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. "But I need to apologize to your son. Please." Grace slammed the hood down with more force than necessary. "You need to apologize? Or your publicist needs you to apologize, because there's a difference, Mr. Brennan, and Levi knows the difference better than most people." "Mom," Levi's voice came from the cab, quiet but clear. His heart rate is elevated. Respiratory pattern indicates genuine distress. He's not lying. Grace blinked. Levi rarely commented on other people's emotional states. His autism made reading social cues difficult, though he'd developed his own system based on observable physiological markers. If Levi said Wyatt was genuinely distressed, he probably was. "That doesn't mean I have to make this easy for him," Grace said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Wyatt stepped closer, slowly, like he was approaching a spooked horse. "I was an asshole. There's no excuse for what I did or what I said. I let my ego get in the way of basic human decency and I hurt your son. I'm sorry." Grace studied him in the harsh security lighting. His perfect hair was mussed, his shirt untucked, and there were actual bags under his eyes. He looked like a man who'd spent the last several hours being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. "Levi," Grace said softly, "do you want to hear what Mr. Brennan has to say?" Levi emerged from the truck slowly, his crutch planted firmly. He looked at Wyatt with that direct, unfiltered gaze that made most people uncomfortable. "You kicked my crutch at 3:47 p.m. The impact occurred at a 43-degree angle with approximately 12 pounds of force. My phone screen cracked in 7 places." Wyatt flinched. "I'll replace your phone and I'll do whatever I can to make this right." "Can you unkick my crutch?" Levi asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than sarcastic. "No," Wyatt admitted. "I can't." "Then you can't make it right. You can only try to do better in the future." Levi paused, his head tilting slightly. "Your apology appears genuine. Your pupil dilation and vocal tremor suggest authentic remorse rather than performative guilt." Grace felt something in her chest soften despite herself, her brilliant, literal, impossibly perceptive son. "He's right," Wyatt said, looking at Grace now. "I can't undo what I did, but I can do better, if you'll let me try." Before Grace could respond, headlights swept across the parking lot. But instead of the tow truck, a police cruiser pulled up, followed by 2 more vehicles. Sheriff Tommy Ricketts emerged from the first car, his expression grim. "Grace, Wyatt." He nodded to each of them. "We've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" Grace asked, her protective instincts immediately on high alert. "Marcus Chen. He was riding in the saddle bronc competition this afternoon. His horse threw him bad in the final round." Tommy's jaw tightened. "Equipment failure. Someone tampered with his saddle rigging. He's got 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. He's at Amarillo General now." Wyatt went very still. "Tampering? You're sure?" "Forensics are running tests, but the leather was cut nearly through, then covered with some kind of adhesive to hide it. Professional job." Tommy looked between them. "This is the 3rd accident in 6 weeks across the circuit. Austin, Lubbock, now here. Different riders, different events, but same MO. Subtle sabotage designed to look like bad luck or worn equipment." Grace's mind was already racing. Someone's targeting specific riders. Or someone's manipulating outcomes, Wyatt said quietly. "There's been a lot of unusual betting activity lately. Buck mentioned it last month, but I didn't think much of it." Tommy pulled out his notebook. "That's what we're thinking too. Problem is we don't know who's behind it or who might be next. I'm here to ask if any of you saw anything unusual this afternoon. Anyone hanging around the equipment areas? Anyone acting suspicious?" Levi's hand shot up like he was in a classroom. "I documented 47 vendor booths, 17 equipment trailers, and approximately 312 individual people in the staging area between 2:15 and 4:30 p.m. Everyone turned to stare at him. "You what?" Tommy said. Levi pulled out his cracked phone, swiping through screens with practiced efficiency. "I was mapping the rodeo grounds. I took photos and logged timestamps. I have documentation of everyone who entered and exited the restricted areas because the patterns were interesting. Security protocols here are inefficient. There were 6 unauthorized access points." Grace felt pride and worry collide in her chest. Her son's exceptional memory and attention to detail were both his greatest gift and his biggest vulnerability. "Levi, honey, can you send those photos to Sheriff Ricketts?" "Already doing it." Levi's fingers moved across his screen. You'll have them in 90 seconds. I organized them by timestamp and location. Tommy's phone began buzzing with incoming files. His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline as he scrolled through them. Kid, this is incredible. You might have just documented our saboteur without even knowing it. I knew it, Levi said matter-of-factly. I documented everything. That's what documentation means. Wyatt was looking at Levi with something like awe. Did you see anyone tampering with Marcus's equipment? Levi's face scrunched in concentration. Define tampering. Someone touching or adjusting his saddle when they shouldn't have been. 3 people touched Marcus Chen's saddle between 2:30 and 3:15 p.m. Marcus Chen himself, his manager Devin Cross, and an unidentified male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a black baseball cap and sunglasses. The unidentified male spent 42 seconds near the saddle, which was 17 seconds longer than average for people passing through the area. The parking lot went silent, except for the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Can you identify this person from your photos? Tommy asked carefully. Levi scrolled through his phone and turned it around. The image was slightly grainy but clear enough. A man in dark clothing, his face partially obscured, his hands near a saddle rack. Wyatt leaned in and his face went pale. I know him. That's Reed Sullivan. He used to work security for the circuit 3 years ago. Got fired for running an illegal betting pool. And now he's back, Grace said softly. Sabotaging riders. Tommy was already on his radio, calling for backup and putting out an APB. As his voice crackled through official protocols, Grace looked at her son, who was calmly organizing his photos into folders, completely unaware that he'd just become a key witness in a criminal investigation. Wyatt caught her eye. Ms. Holloway, Grace, your son might have just solved this case, but if Reed realizes Levi can identify him, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Grace's blood ran cold as the implication sank in. Somewhere out there, a dangerous man was manipulating rodeo outcomes for profit. And now her son, with his photographic memory and detailed documentation, was the biggest threat to that operation. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Grace pulled Levi close, her mind already racing through scenarios, calculating risks, planning defenses. She'd protected her son from 1,000 dangers over the years. Bullies, sensory overload, a world that didn't understand him. But this was different. This was real, immediate danger. Wyatt stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. I have security. My ranch is 20 minutes from here. Gated property, cameras, the works. You and Levi should stay there tonight. Both of you. Until we know Reed's been caught. Grace wanted to refuse on principle. She didn't need help, especially not from Wyatt Brennan. But as she looked at her son, still scrolling through photos with innocent focus, maternal instinct overrode pride. One night, she said firmly, and you stay out of our way. Wyatt nodded, relief evident in his face. One night, I promise. As Sheriff Ricketts coordinated with his deputies and Grace gathered her things from the disabled truck, none of them noticed the dark sedan parked at the far end of the lot, its occupant watching through tinted windows, a phone pressed to his ear. We've got a problem, Reed Sullivan said into the phone, his voice cold. The kid has photos. Everything. The Brennan Ranch sprawled across 800 acres of prime Texas hill country. Its main house a sprawling limestone structure that looked more like a luxury resort than a home. As Wyatt's truck passed through the wrought iron gates, each side emblazoned with an ornate B, Grace felt her discomfort grow. This wasn't just wealth. This was the kind of generational money that built wings on hospitals and had downtown streets named after the family. Mom, the driveway is exactly 3 miles long, Levi observed from the back seat, his eyes tracking the odometer. That's 864 feet. The average driveway is 63 feet. This isn't an average anything, honey, Grace muttered. Wyatt caught her eye in the rearview mirror. I know it's excessive. My grandfather built it during the oil boom. He wanted everyone to know the Brennans had arrived. There was something in his voice, not quite shame, but close. Most of the time, it's just me rattling around in there. Motion sensor lights blazed to life as they approached the circular drive, illuminating immaculate landscaping and a fountain that probably cost more than Grace's veterinary practice grossed in a year. A woman in her 50s emerged from the front door, sturdy build, kind face, wearing jeans and a University of Texas sweatshirt. "That's Rosa," Wyatt said, parking near the entrance. "She manages the house, but more importantly, she keeps me from turning into a complete disaster. Rosa, this is Grace Holloway and her son Levi." Rosa's eyes swept over them with the practiced assessment of someone who'd spent decades reading people. Her expression softened when she saw Levi carefully extracting himself from the truck with his crutch. "Welcome. I've prepared the East Wing guest rooms. They're quiet, away from the main living areas. Figured you might want some peace." Grace felt her shoulders relax slightly. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." "I raised 3 boys," Rosa said simply. "I know when folks need space." She turned to Levi. "Young man, the guest room has blackout curtains if the lights bother you, and the thermostat is set to 72 degrees, but you can adjust it however you like. There's a white noise machine in the closet if you need it." Levi looked at her with surprised interest. "You have accommodations for sensory processing differences?" "I have accommodations for human beings," Rosa replied with a warm smile. "Come on, I'll show you around." As Rosa led them inside, Grace caught Wyatt's eye. "You told her," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I called from the road. Figured if we're asking you to trust me, the least I could do was make sure Levi would be comfortable." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking uncertain. Was that overstepping? Grace wanted to maintain her anger, to keep him at arm's length where he belonged. But the gesture was so unexpectedly considerate that she felt her defenses crack. "No, it was thoughtful. Thank you." The interior of the house was surprisingly understated. Exposed wooden beams, comfortable leather furniture, family photos on the walls instead of the formal portraits she'd expected. Rosa led them through a spacious kitchen where something savory simmered on the stove, then down a hallway lined with rodeo memorabilia and championship buckles displayed in shadow boxes. "This is you." Rosa opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was both elegant and unpretentious. King-sized bed, sitting area, and an ensuite bathroom. "Levi's room is right next door, connecting door if you want it open." Levi's room was perfect, minimalist without being sterile, with the promised blackout curtains and a desk positioned near the window. He immediately began his ritual, checking the locks, testing the light switches, establishing his baseline of safety. "Bathroom has a walk-in shower, no tub," Rosa told Grace. "Brighter overhead lights and dimmer reading lights, all separate switches, and the Wi-Fi password is posted on the desk. I'll bring up some dinner in about 20 minutes unless you'd rather come down." "Here would be wonderful," Grace said, overwhelmed by the casual competence. "Rosa, you didn't have to go to all this trouble." "Wasn't trouble, was just being decent." Rosa's eyes crinkled. "You two settle in. Wyatt will be in his office making phone calls. The man's in damage control mode with about 15 different people. But if you need anything, my number's programmed into the house phones." After Rosa left, Grace sat on the edge of her bed and let herself breathe for the first time in hours. Through the connecting door, she could hear Levi organizing his backpack, muttering measurements and calculations, his self-soothing pattern when stress levels were high. Her phone buzzed. Sheriff Ricketts. Still looking for Reed Sullivan, his apartment was cleared out, putting surveillance on known associates. "You're safe where you are. We'll update in AM, safe." The word felt foreign. Grace had spent 16 years being the only thing standing between her son and a world that could be cruel and unpredictable. Accepting help, especially from Wyatt Brennan, felt like betraying that responsibility. "Mom?" Levi appeared in the doorway. "This room has 17 electrical outlets, that's significantly above code. Also, There are motion sensors in the hallway that automatically illuminate when someone approaches. The response time is 3 seconds. Very efficient, Grace said with a slight smile. Wyatt Brennan has extensive security infrastructure, Levi continued, his analytical mind clearly processing the situation. Cameras at every entrance, monitored alarm system, reinforced doors. We are statistically safer here than in our apartment, which only has one deadbolt and windows that don't lock properly. Grace's throat tightened, her brilliant boy, quantifying their poverty without judgment, just stating facts. I know, honey, but our apartment is home. Home is defined by the people, not the location, Levi said, then paused. That's what you always tell me when we have to move. They'd moved 4 times in 10 years following affordable rent and Grace's work opportunities. Levi hated transitions, but he'd learned to adapt because Grace was his constant. Now here they were in a mansion hiding from a criminal, dependent on a man Grace had spent the afternoon despising. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Wyatt stood in the hallway looking uncertain in his own home. Rosa's bringing up dinner. I thought maybe we should talk about next steps, if you're up for it. Grace wanted to say no, wanted to maintain her walls, but they were in this situation whether she liked it or not. Give us 10 minutes. They gathered in a sitting room adjacent to the guest wing, Wyatt, Grace, and Levi, with Rosa bringing in plates of pot roast, roasted vegetables, and homemade rolls that smelled like heaven. Levi ate methodically, his food group separated on the plate, but Grace noticed he finished everything, which meant he felt safe enough to eat. That was something. Wyatt had showered and changed into a plain t-shirt and jeans, his usual swagger replaced by something more genuine. He spread a tablet on the coffee table, pulling up a document. I talked to Buck Morrison and the Rodeo Commission. They're reviewing security footage from all 3 incidents, Austin, Lubbock, and today. With Levi's photos, we might be able to establish a pattern. Why are you involved in the RIAR? Grace asked bluntly. You could hand everything over to the police and walk away. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. Because Marcus Chen is my friend. Because I've competed against half the guys who've been injured. And I can't just stand by while someone destroys their careers. Or worse. And because... He looked at Levi. Because your son might be in danger because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Documenting things like he does. If I hadn't been an asshole and kicked his crutch, maybe I would have noticed something was wrong earlier. Maybe I could have stopped this. You didn't cause Reed Sullivan to sabotage equipment, Grace said, though her tone was less harsh than before. No, but I've been so wrapped up in my own ego that I missed what was happening right under my nose. Buck tried to tell me about the betting irregularities. Other riders mentioned feeling uneasy about their equipment. I dismissed it all because it didn't directly affect me. Wyatt's hands clenched. I'm done being that guy. Levi looked up from his plate. Personality change is difficult but not impossible. Studies show that significant emotional events can trigger behavioral modification in adults, though sustained change requires consistent effort over an average of 66 days. Wyatt blinked. So you're saying I have to prove it? I'm saying most people revert to baseline behaviors when the emotional catalyst is removed, Levi replied. You'll need systemic change, not just reactive guilt. Grace hid a smile behind her hand, her son the accidental truth-teller. Fair enough, Wyatt said, and Grace could see he was actually considering it. How do I do that? You start by following through on what you promise, Grace said. Not just to us, but to everyone. You stop performing and start being genuine. And you accept that some people might never forgive you, and that has to be okay. The words hung between them, weighted with more than just this situation. Grace thought about her ex-husband, Levi's father, who'd left when their son was diagnosed at age 3. I didn't sign up for this, he'd said, as if a child was a subscription service you could cancel. She'd learned then that character revealed itself in crisis, and apologies without action were just noise. Wyatt's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face hardened. It's from an unknown number. He turned the screen so they could see. The message was brief and chilling. The kid saw too much. Return the photos and nobody gets hurt. Grace's blood ran cold. How did they get your number? It's not exactly secret, Wyatt said grimly. I'm listed on the Rodeo circuit website and my publicist hands it out to sponsors. He was already dialing. I'm calling Sheriff Ricketts. While Wyatt spoke in urgent tones to the sheriff, Levi pulled out his phone and began scrolling. I backed up all photos to 3 separate cloud services at 7:23 p.m. Deleting the originals would be futile. The data exists in multiple locations with redundant security protocols. Don't tell them that, Grace said quickly. Why not? It's factually accurate. Because right now they think you're the only source. If they know the photos are everywhere, you become less valuable but also less of a target. Grace's mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. Wyatt ended his call. Ricketts is sending a deputy to park outside the gates tonight. They're trying to trace the number, but it's probably a burner phone. He looked at Grace. He also said you two should stay here at least through tomorrow. They're coordinating with the FBI since this crosses state lines. The betting ring appears to be operating across multiple rodeos. FBI? Levi's eyes widened behind his glasses. Federal jurisdiction means they suspect organized crime elements. The penalties for interstate criminal conspiracy include up to 20 years imprisonment under Title 18, United States Code, Section 371. You know federal statutes? Wyatt asked, impressed despite the situation. I know many things. Pattern recognition and information retention are areas of strength for me. Levi paused. My social skills and motor coordination are areas of weakness. It's called having an uneven cognitive profile. Grace watched Wyatt process this, saw the moment understanding clicked into place. You see patterns other people miss. Correct. Which is why I noticed that Reed Sullivan, if that's the man from my photographs, has appeared in the background of 17 photos from 3 different rodeos over the past 6 weeks. He's been following the circuit. The room went very still. 17 times? Grace whispered. Levi nodded, pulling up a folder on his phone. I've been documenting rodeos for 2 years. It's my project. I started noticing repeat attendees and began cataloging them. Reed Sullivan appeared sporadically until 6 weeks ago. Then his attendance became regular, and he always positioned himself near equipment areas. He showed them a series of images, each one showing the same man in different locations, always in the background, always watching. The pattern suggested deliberate behavior rather than coincidental attendance. Wyatt stared at the screen. You've been tracking him without knowing you were tracking him. I track everyone, Levi said simply. That's what I do. People follow patterns. I find those patterns interesting. Grace felt pride and fear warring in her chest. Her son's gift had just become their best weapon and their greatest liability. Levi, honey, I need you to send all of those photos to Sheriff Ricketts right now. Everything you have on Reed Sullivan and anyone else who appears repeatedly in suspicious contexts. Already queued for transmission. Sending now. Levi's fingers flew across his screen. I've also documented 4 other individuals who display statistically anomalous attendance patterns. Shall I include them? Yes, Wyatt and Grace said simultaneously. As Levi worked, Rosa appeared in the doorway. I set the security system to maximum. Motion sensors on every window, cameras recording to off-site servers, and I called in Pete from the ranch security team. He's doing perimeter checks every 30 minutes. She looked at Grace with fierce determination. Nobody's getting to that boy on my watch. Grace's eyes stung with unexpected tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just drink this tea and try to get some rest. Rosa handed her a steaming mug. Chamomile with a little bit of whiskey. My mama's recipe for when the world gets too heavy. After Rosa left, Wyatt stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark expanse of his property. I meant what I said earlier. I want to help. Really help. Not just throw money at the problem. Tell me what you need. Grace sipped her tea, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. What did she need? She needed her son to be safe. She needed to stop feeling like the world was constantly one crisis away from disaster. She needed to trust that not everyone would abandon them when things got difficult. But what she said was simpler. I need you to be honest. About everything. No more performance, no more ego. If we're trusting you with our safety, I need to know the real Wyatt Brennan, not the champion everyone sees. Wyatt turned to face her, and in the lamplight he looked younger, more vulnerable. The real me is a guy who inherited too much money and used it as an excuse to never try too hard at anything real. I'm good at riding bulls because it's 8 seconds of adrenaline where consequences don't catch up until later. I'm bad at relationships because they require sustained effort. I kicked your son's crutch because in that moment I couldn't admit I'd made a mistake. He paused. That's who I am. I'm trying to be better, but I don't know if I know how. The honesty was stark, almost painful. Grace recognized it because she knew something about being raw and exposed. Nobody knows how, she said quietly. You just keep showing up and trying. That's all any of us can do. Levi looked up from his phone. Sheriff Ricketts received all files. He says the FBI task force is reviewing them tonight. We should attempt to sleep. Optimal cognitive function requires 7 to 9 hours of rest, and we're already operating under heightened stress conditions. He's right, Wyatt said with a slight smile. You two should rest. I'll be in the office if you need anything. I'm too wired to sleep anyway. As Grace and Levi retreated to their rooms, she paused in the doorway. Wyatt, thank you for this, for being honest. It matters. He nodded, something shifting in his expression. Good night, Grace. In her room, Grace lay in the expensive sheets and stared at the ceiling, listening to Levi's soft breathing through the connecting door. Somewhere out there, dangerous people were making plans. But here, in this moment, her son was safe and sleeping soundly. That was enough. In a cheap motel 40 miles away, Reed Sullivan threw his burner phone against the wall, watching it shatter. The kid backed everything up. Multiple servers. The man sitting across from him. Expensive suit, cold eyes, didn't look concerned. Then we adjust the plan. The boy's gift makes him valuable. Maybe more valuable than we thought. You want to grab him? I want leverage. The veterinarian will do anything to protect her son. That makes her predictable. And the cowboy? The man smiled without warmth. He's already playing hero. Let's see how far his conscience will take him. Reed leaned forward. What do you want me to do? Watch. Wait. And when the moment comes, make sure they understand exactly what's at stake. Outside, thunder rolled across the Texas sky, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Grace woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of low voices drifting up from somewhere below. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. The sheets were too soft, the room too quiet. Then reality crashed back. Reed Sullivan, the threats, her son's accidental documentation of a criminal conspiracy. She checked her phone, 6:47 a.m. Through the connecting door, she could hear Levi already awake, his voice reciting something rhythmic. She knocked softly before entering. Levi sat cross-legged on his bed, his laptop open, surrounded by printed photos he'd apparently requested from Rosa. He was arranging them in a pattern only he could see, muttering timestamps and locations. Morning, honey. Did you sleep okay? 7 hours and 42 minutes within optimal range. He didn't look up from his work. I've been analyzing the pattern of Reed Sullivan's movements. He's not working alone. There's a secondary figure who appears in 12 of the photos, always maintaining a distance of 50 to 100 feet from Sullivan. They're coordinating. Grace's pulse quickened. Have you sent this to Sheriff Ricketts? Sending now. Levi's fingers flew across his keyboard. The secondary figure is more careful, always wears different clothing, uses crowd cover effectively. But he has a distinctive gait. His left foot turns out approximately 15 degrees more than his right. It's consistent across all images. Your brain is extraordinary, you know that? Levi finally looked at her, his expression serious. It's not extraordinary. It's just different. Extraordinary implies superior, which creates unrealistic expectations and social pressure. Different is factually accurate. Grace smiled, her heart swelling with the familiar mixture of pride and protectiveness. You're right. Different is perfect. A soft knock interrupted them. Rosa appeared with a breakfast tray, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and fresh orange juice. Figured you might want to eat before dealing with the chaos downstairs. Sheriff's here with an FBI agent. They've been talking with Wyatt for about 20 minutes. FBI's already here? Grace accepted the tray gratefully. Arrived 40 minutes ago. They don't waste time when there's organized crime involved. Rosa's expression was grim. Pete found tire tracks near the south fence line around 3 this morning. Someone was watching the property. Grace's appetite vanished. Did they see who? Gone before Pete could get close, but they left these. Rosa held up her phone, showing a photo of tire tracks and something else. Cigarette butts, deliberately arranged in an arrow pointing toward the house. That's not someone checking property lines. That's a message. Levi stood abruptly, his routine disrupted by new information. They're demonstrating capability, showing they can access the property despite security measures. It's psychological intimidation designed to create fear and compliance. Well, it's working, Grace muttered. She took a steadying breath. Okay, let's go see what the FBI has to say. The great room had been transformed into a makeshift command center. A woman in her mid-40s wearing a crisp FBI windbreaker stood near a laptop, reviewing files with Wyatt and Sheriff Ricketts. She looked up as Grace and Levi entered, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. Ms. Holloway, I'm Special Agent Diana Reeves, FBI Organized Crime Task Force. Her handshake was firm, professional. And you must be Levi. I've been reviewing your photographs. Your documentation is remarkably thorough. Levi shifted his weight, uncomfortable with direct praise from strangers. I simply record what I observe. Pattern recognition is a natural cognitive function. Not like this, Reeves said with genuine respect. Most witnesses miss critical details. You've given us more actionable intelligence in one night than we gathered in 3 weeks of investigation. She gestured to the laptop. We've identified your secondary figure. His name is Marcus Webb, former Rodeo security, like Sullivan. They worked together before both were fired for running betting pools. We think they've escalated to sabotage and extortion. Wyatt stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, his face drawn. He'd clearly been up all night. How big is this operation? Bigger than we thought. We've tracked unusual betting patterns across 8 states, 15 rodeos. Someone's been making substantial money manipulating outcomes. We're talking millions of dollars. The sabotage is just one piece. They're also intimidating riders, bribing judges, even tampering with stock animals. Grace felt sick. Stock animals? You mean they're herding horses and bulls? Not directly. They're using mild sedatives or stimulants to affect performance. Nothing that shows up in standard testing, but enough to tip outcomes. Reeves pulled up a map on her screen showing red dots clustered across Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Colorado. We think there's a larger organization behind this. Webb and Sullivan are mid-level operatives. We need to identify who's running the show. And you want to use Levi as bait, Grace said flatly. The room went silent. Wyatt's head snapped toward Reeves. That's not happening. I'm not suggesting we put him in danger, Reeves said carefully. But we do need his help. The photos show Webb and Sullivan communicating with a third party at the Lubbock Rodeo. If Levi can identify that person, we might be able to move up the chain. Levi walked to the laptop and studied the screen with intense focus. Show me the Lubbock images. Time frame between 1:00 and 5:00 p.m. on the date of the incident. Reeves pulled up the files. Levi leaned in, his eyes scanning with machine-like precision. Grace watched her son work, seeing the gears turn behind his careful expression. After 90 seconds, he pointed to a photo. This one, 3:47 p.m. Webb is positioned near the southwest gate. He's looking at someone outside the frame, and his body language indicates deferential interaction. He's receiving instructions. Reeves zoomed in on the angle Levi indicated. Can you estimate where the other person would be standing based on Webb's sightline? Levi's fingers traced an invisible trajectory on the screen. Approximately 40 feet northwest, elevation suggesting the person was on a raised platform or tall. Probably between 6'2" and 6'5" based on Webb's neck angle. I've got 3 photos from that time frame in that direction, Sheriff Ricketts said, pulling up his own tablet. Crowd shots, vendor areas. Wait. He froze on an image. There. The photo showed a tall man in an expensive Western shirt and polished boots, standing slightly apart from the crowd. His face was turned away from the camera, but his posture radiated authority. A Rolex glinted on his wrist. That's not rodeo crowd, Wyatt said slowly. That's money, real money. Can you see his face in any other shots? Reeves asked Levi. Levi was already scrolling through files. Negative. He's camera aware. Always positioned to avoid direct facial capture, but I have this. He pulled up another image. His left hand, distinctive ring, large turquoise stone set in silver with a specific pattern. It's visible in 4 separate photos across 2 rodeos. Reeves leaned forward. That's enough to run through our databases. If he's got money and connections, he's probably been photographed at charity events, business functions. We can match the ring. She looked at Levi with something approaching awe. Son, you just gave us our first real lead on the person running this operation. I'm not your son, Levi said automatically. I'm Grace's son, and it's not a lead. It's observable data. You're deriving the lead from the data. Grace saw Wyatt hide a smile despite the tension. Even Reeves's mouth twitched. Fair correction, thank you, Levi. Rosa appeared with fresh coffee, but her expression was troubled. Wyatt, there's something you should see. One of the ranch hands found this on the north fence about 20 minutes ago. She held up a plastic evidence bag containing a piece of paper. Reeves took it carefully, her face hardening as she read. She turned the bag so they could see. The message was printed in plain block letters. The boy for the photos. Tonight. Location TBA. No police or he disappears. Grace's world tilted. She felt Levi tense beside her, his breathing pattern shifting. Without thinking, she pulled him close, her mind already racing through impossible choices. That's not happening, Wyatt said again, his voice hard as steel. They're not touching him. They won't, Reeves said firmly. We're moving you to a secure FBI facility within the hour. Full protective custody until we make arrests. No. Levi's voice cut through the discussion, surprising everyone. Protective custody will disrupt my routine. New environment, unfamiliar people, unpredictable schedule. My stress levels will become unmanageable. I'll be non-functional. Honey, your safety, Grace began, is contingent on my ability to process information effectively, Levi interrupted, his voice rising slightly. I understand the threat. I've calculated the risks, but removing me from a stable environment will compromise my cognitive function, which is currently our most valuable asset in this investigation. He turned to Reeves. You need my pattern recognition capabilities. I need environmental stability. We should negotiate a solution that satisfies both requirements. Grace saw Reeves reassess her son, recognizing not a child who needed protection, but an analytical mind making a strategic argument. What do you propose? Reeves asked carefully. I remain here. Security is enhanced. I continue analyzing data remotely. You set a trap for Webb and Sullivan using the expectation that I'll be moved to FBI custody. Levi's voice was steadier now, locked into problem-solving mode. They'll anticipate a transfer. You use that anticipation against them. Wyatt was nodding. He's right. If we move him, they'll know. They've probably got someone watching the property right now. But if we make it look like we're preparing to transfer him, packing, loading vehicles, visible activity, we can draw them out. Using civilians as bait is against protocol, Reeves said, but her tone suggested she was considering it. I'm not bait, Levi corrected. I'm a strategic asset making an informed choice about acceptable risk levels. There's a difference. Sheriff Ricketts rubbed his jaw. The kid makes a solid point. And if we're being honest, Diana, we both know protective custody doesn't guarantee safety. We've lost witnesses in supposedly secure facilities. At least here, We control the environment. Reeves was silent for a long moment, weighing options. Grace watched her son stand straight despite his crutch, his expression set with a determination she recognized. He'd made his decision using the same logical framework he applied to everything else in his life. She couldn't override that without undermining his autonomy, even though every maternal instinct screamed to lock him in a bunker. "I want triple the security," Reeves finally said. "FBI tactical team on site, surveillance at every access point, and Levi wears a tracker at all times. At the first sign of trouble, we extract everyone. Non-negotiable." "Agreed," Levi said immediately. "Grace?" Reeves looked at her. "This is your call. He's your son." Grace met Levi's eyes behind his glasses, saw her brilliant, literal, unexpectedly brave boy looking back at her. "What do you need from me?" "Trust that I understand the variables," Levi said quietly. "And stay close. Your presence reduces my baseline anxiety by approximately 40%. Grace's throat tightened. "Then I'm not leaving your side." "Neither am I," Wyatt said, and when Grace looked at him, she saw none of the swagger or performance, just a man who'd made a promise and intended to keep it. The next 3 hours were organized chaos. FBI agents in tactical gear arrived in unmarked vehicles, setting up surveillance equipment and establishing defensive positions around the property. Reeves coordinated with her team, while Sheriff Ricketts liaised with local law enforcement. Wyatt worked with his ranch security to integrate systems, and Rosa transformed the kitchen into a command center, keeping everyone fed and caffeinated with quiet efficiency. Levi remained in the great room, his laptop open, systematically reviewing every photo he'd taken over the past 6 weeks. He'd found 17 more images with the turquoise ring, each one providing new data points. The FBI's facial recognition software was running in the background, searching for matches. Grace sat beside him, close enough to provide her 40% anxiety reduction but far enough to let him work. She watched her son's face, seeing the intense concentration that meant he was processing information at a level most people couldn't comprehend. "Mom," Levi said without looking up, "I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "I'm afraid." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his hands trembled slightly on the keyboard. "My logical analysis says the FBI's security measures reduce risk to acceptable levels, but my emotional response is fear. The two systems are in conflict." Grace's heart broke and mended simultaneously. "That's called being human, sweetheart. Logic and emotion don't always agree. It's okay to be afraid." "But I'm still choosing to stay," Levi said. "Because the logic is correct even if the emotion is uncomfortable. That's the right decision, isn't it?" "There's no single right decision. There's just the decision you can live with." Grace touched his shoulder gently. "I'm proud of you. And terrified. Both things are true." "Simultaneous contradictory emotional states," Levi murmured. "I understand those." Wyatt approached with fresh coffee, setting it carefully beside Levi's laptop. "How's the analysis going?" "Productive. I've identified a possible pattern in the betting irregularities. The largest bets are always placed exactly 48 hours before each incident. Someone has advanced knowledge of which riders will be targeted." Reeves overheard and came over immediately. "Can you show me?" Levi pulled up a spreadsheet he'd created, correlating betting data Reeves had shared with incident dates and times. The pattern was stark. Major bets placed, outcomes manipulated, profits withdrawn. The betting accounts are registered to shell companies, but the timing is too precise to be coincidental. Someone is orchestrating both the sabotage and the betting. "This is incredible work," Reeves said, photographing his screen. "We can use this to get warrants, freeze accounts, trace the money." "The money will lead you to the turquoise ring," Levi said with certainty. "He's the one making the decisions. Webb and Sullivan are just implementing them." A commotion at the front entrance made everyone turn. One of the FBI agents was escorting someone inside, a man in his 50s, weathered face, work-worn hands. He looked furious and frightened in equal measure. "What's Devin Cross doing here?" Wyatt said, recognizing Marcus Chen's manager immediately. Devon spotted Wyatt, and his expression shifted to desperation. They took Marcus, straight out of the hospital. I went to check on him this morning and he was gone. Security footage shows 2 men in orderly uniforms wheeling him out at 4:00 a.m. Nobody stopped them because they looked official. The room went cold. Marcus Chen was in protective custody, Reeves said sharply, already on her phone. How the hell did they get to him? You tell me, Devon shot back. All I know is my rider, my friend, is missing, and the last thing the night nurse heard him say was, they found the kid who took pictures. He looked directly at Levi. Marcus was trying to warn you. Grace instinctively moved closer to Levi, her mind reeling. They'd taken Marcus as leverage, as a demonstration of reach and capability. The message was clear. No one is safe. Wyatt's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He held it up so Reeves could see before answering on speaker. Mr. Brennan. The voice was smooth, educated, with a hint of West Texas drawl. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Photos, documentation, evidence, and I have something you want. Marcus Chen is alive and unharmed for now. Who is this? Wyatt demanded. Someone who's been very patient while you play hero with the veterinarian and her gifted son. But my patience has limits. A pause. Here's what's going to happen. The boy gives us every copy of every photo, cloud storage, backups, everything. In exchange, we return Marcus and walk away. You get to keep playing Rodeo and everyone lives happily ever after. And if we refuse, Reeves interjected. The voice chuckled. Then Marcus Chen's career-ending injuries become life-ending and we move on to more direct methods of persuasion. I think young Levi would find it very difficult to maintain his cognitive function if something happened to his mother. Grace's blood turned to ice. Beside her, Levi had gone very still, his breathing shallow. You have 12 hours, the voice continued. We'll send instructions. Come alone, bring the data, and this all ends peacefully. Involve more law enforcement, and people die. Starting with Marcus. The line went dead. The room erupted in controlled chaos. Reeves barking orders, agents tracking the call, Sheriff Ricketts coordinating responses. But Grace only saw her son's face, saw the moment his emotional regulation crumbled under the weight of too much fear, too much responsibility. I can't, Levi's voice cracked. If Marcus dies because of my photos, if you get hurt because I documented... Stop, Grace said firmly, kneeling in front of him. This is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. Bad people made bad choices. That's on them, not you. But the data is just information. You are what matters. Not photos, not evidence. You. Grace held his face gently. We're going to figure this out together. You, me, and all these people who are choosing to help us, okay? Levi nodded shakily. Wyatt crouched beside them, his voice low and steady. Listen to me, Levi. I spent most of my life being selfish and stupid. But I'm learning something important from you. Doing the right thing isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing to be brave anyway. You've been brave every second of this. Let us be brave for you now. Reeves ended her phone call and approached. We got a partial trace. The call came from a cell tower near the Texas-Oklahoma border. He's mobile, probably heading this way. She looked at the 3 of them, Grace, Levi, and Wyatt, and her expression softened slightly. We're not making an exchange. We're not giving him anything. But we are going to get Marcus back and end this. I need you to trust the process. The process doesn't have a great track record so far, Grace said bitterly. True. But now we have something they don't know about. Reeves pulled up a photo on her tablet. While you were talking, our facial recognition got a hit on the turquoise ring. This is your mystery man. The photo showed a distinguished-looking man at a charity gala, his arm around a state senator, that distinctive ring-catching camera flash. The caption identified him. Randall Vance, CEO of Vance Energy Solutions, donates $500K to Children's Hospital. Wyatt's face went white. Randy Vance, I know him. Our families have done business for 30 years. He's been to my house for God's sake. He's also been running an illegal betting operation and orchestrating criminal sabotage, and Reeves said, We've got enough for warrants now. We're moving on his office, his home, his known associates. We're going to take his entire operation apart. But what about Marcus? Devin Cross asked desperately. We find him, and we make sure Randall Vance never threatens anyone again. Reeves looked at Levi. Your documentation didn't just help us catch criminals, it's going to save lives, including Marcus Chen's. Do you understand that? Levi processed this slowly, his analytical mind reasserting control over his fear. My data collection served a positive function despite my original intent being purely observational. Exactly. Outside, the Texas sky was darkening with afternoon thunderclouds. Grace held her son close and tried not to think about the 12-hour deadline ticking down, about Marcus Chen alone and injured somewhere, about a wealthy man with powerful connections who just threatened her child's life. Wyatt met her eyes across the room, and in that moment, some unspoken understanding passed between them. They'd both failed in different ways, him through arrogance, her through the impossible burden of protecting her son alone. But maybe together they could be enough. What do we do now? Grace asked quietly. Reeves smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Now, we show Randall Vance what happens when he threatens the wrong people. The sun was setting over the Brennan Ranch when everything went sideways. Reeves had coordinated simultaneous raids on 3 Vance Energy Solutions properties, corporate headquarters in Dallas, Randall Vance's estate in Highland Park, and a warehouse facility in Fort Worth suspected of being a betting operation hub. FBI tactical teams moved in at precisely 6:47 p.m., expecting to find evidence, maybe some mid-level operatives. What they found was nothing. Empty offices with wiped hard drives, a mansion cleared of personal effects, and a warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used in months. Randall Vance had vanished, taking his operation with him. He knew we were coming, Reeves said through gritted teeth, pacing the great room while her team scrambled for new leads. Someone tipped him off. Wyatt stood at the window, his reflection ghostly in the darkening glass. Or he's been planning this for weeks. You don't run an operation this sophisticated without exit strategies. Grace sat with Levi on the couch, her arm around his shoulders. He'd been quiet for the past hour, processing the day's events in his methodical way. His laptop was closed for the first time since morning. Even Levi recognized when data collection had to pause for survival. Sheriff Ricketts burst through the front door, his face flushed from running. We've got activity at the old Mesquite Fairgrounds 20 minutes south. Anonymous tip came through dispatch, said they saw men unloading someone from a van into the abandoned livestock building. Matches Marcus Chen's description. It's a trap, Reeves said immediately. Probably, Ricketts agreed. But if Marcus is really there, then we don't have a choice. Wyatt grabbed his truck keys from the entry table. I'm going. The hell you are, Reeves snapped. This is FBI jurisdiction. And Marcus Chen is my friend. I'm not sitting here while he's... Mom. Levi's voice cut through the argument. He was staring at his laptop screen, which he'd just opened. I received an email sent 4 minutes ago from an encrypted account. Everyone crowded around as Levi turned the laptop. The email was brief. Levi, you're smart enough to know how this ends. Your data for Marcus Chen's life. The fairgrounds, Building 7, 1 hour. You come alone with all files on a single drive, or he dies screaming. Your choice, genius. Below the text was an attached video file. Levi's hand trembled as he clicked it. The footage showed Marcus Chen tied to a chair in a dim concrete room, his face bruised, one eye swollen shut. He was trying to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. Don't come. It's not worth... The video cut off abruptly. Grace felt Levi go rigid beside her. They sent this to me specifically. They're not negotiating with law enforcement. They're negotiating with a 16-year-old. Because they think you're manipulable, Reeves said quickly. Levi, this is psychological warfare. They want you emotional and irrational. I'm autistic, not emotionless, Levi said, his voice tight. I understand what they're attempting, but Marcus Chen is injured because he tried to warn me. That creates a moral obligation. No, Grace said firmly. Absolutely not. We're not sending you into... I'm not suggesting I actually go, Levi interrupted. I'm suggesting we make them believe I'm going while law enforcement establishes tactical superiority. He looked at Reeves. You need a decoy operation. Use me as bait, but control all variables. Wyatt was already nodding. I go in Levi's place. Similar height if I hunch. Keep the lighting low. Buy your team time to get into position. They'll know immediately, Reeves argued. The moment you're close enough. Then I don't get close. I show up, they reveal their position to verify the target, your people move in. Wyatt's jaw was set with determination Grace hadn't seen before. It's not perfect, but it's something. Reeves studied him for a long moment. You understand you could get killed? Yeah. Wyatt glanced at Grace, then Levi. But some things are worth the risk. The next 40 minutes were a blur of preparation. FBI tactical teams mobilized toward the Mesquite Fairgrounds while Reeves coordinated with Dallas PD for perimeter support. Wyatt changed into dark clothing similar to what Levi typically wore, and Rosa found a baseball cap to hide his features at distance. Grace pulled Wyatt aside as he prepared to leave. This is insane. You know that, right? Completely. He managed a crooked smile. But I meant what I said. I'm done being the guy who only thinks about himself. Marcus is in that building because of choices I could have prevented if I'd been paying attention. And your son. He looked toward where Levi sat with his laptop, coordinating data with the FBI. He's the bravest kid I've ever met. Least I can do is try to match that. Don't die trying to prove something, Grace said quietly. We need you. Levi needs... She stopped, surprised by her own words. Wyatt's expression softened. I'll be careful. Promise. He touched her hand briefly, then headed for the door where Reeves waited with final instructions. Levi appeared at Grace's side, watching Wyatt leave. His heart rate is elevated but controlled. Respiratory pattern indicates fear management rather than panic. He's genuinely committed to this course of action. I know. Grace wrapped her arm around her son. People surprise you sometimes. Yes, Levi said thoughtfully. They do. The Mesquite Fairgrounds had been abandoned for 3 years, its buildings slowly succumbing to Texas weather and neglect. Building 7 was a massive livestock facility, all concrete floors and metal framework, with enough shadows to hide an army. Wyatt approached on foot, a thumb drive in his pocket and a wire transmitting every sound back to Reeves's command vehicle half a mile away. FBI tactical teams were positioned in 3 directions, night vision engaged, waiting for Vance's people to reveal themselves. Target approaching building. Someone whispered over the radio. Hold positions. Wyatt's boots crunched on gravel. The building's main door stood open, darkness beyond. Every instinct screamed trap, but he kept walking. That's far enough, Mr. Brennan. The voice came from inside the building. Familiar, educated Randall Vance himself. Wyatt stopped 10 feet from the entrance. I'm not Brennan. I'm Levi Holloway. A laugh echoed from the darkness. Please, you think we can't tell a 6'2" cowboy from a 16-year-old with a crutch? Nice try, though. Points for creativity. Floodlights suddenly blazed to life, blinding Wyatt momentarily. When his vision cleared, he saw them. Marcus Chen still tied to that chair in the center of the building, Randall Vance standing beside him in an expensive suit, and Reed Sullivan with Marcus Webb flanking the exits, both armed. Where's the boy? Vance demanded. Safe. Far from here, you're not getting near him. Vance's expression hardened. Then Marcus dies. Simple as that. He nodded to Sullivan, who raised his weapon toward Marcus's head. Wait. Wyatt's hands came up. The data. It's all here. Every photo. Every file. Just let him go. You expect me to believe that? After the FBI raided my properties? Vance shook his head. No, Mr. Brennan. This ends differently. You're going to call Grace Holloway right now and tell her to bring her son here. In exchange, Marcus lives and you both walk away. Refuse and we kill all 3 of you. Wyatt stalls for time while the FBI closes in on CEO Randall Vance, who threatens to have Levi killed if Grace doesn't comply. When tactical teams finally breach the hideout, chaos erupts. Marcus, though injured and tied, manages to break free and help take down Vance. With the criminals arrested, Wyatt messages Grace, "It's over. We're all okay." 3 weeks later, the Lone Star charity rodeo returns to Amarillo with renewed integrity after the scandal. Grace and Levi attend, respected for their role in exposing the betting ring. Marcus is honored first, followed by Wyatt, who surprises the crowd by apologizing publicly for kicking Levi's crutch weeks earlier. He credits Levi's keen observations and Grace's strength for helping save the sport. Wyatt announces he's leaving competition to work on rodeo safety and launching a scholarship for neurodivergent kids like Levi. Then, he invites Grace and Levi down to present Levi with a lifetime VIP pass and offers Grace a professional contract as the rodeo's veterinarian. The gesture moves them both, and Levi enthusiastically accepts a dinner invitation. As the rodeo continues, Grace notices Wyatt's genuine transformation, his humility, his care for others. Levi even acknowledges the change with his own precise way of measuring behavior. Under a golden Texas sunset, Grace realizes she no longer has to protect her son alone. Wyatt smiles at her from across the arena, and she returns the smile, hopeful about what comes next.